Hey everyone, my name is Morten, or Esser as my friends call me, and welcome to my gaming cave. A little while back I had the opportunity to play a game of Twilight Imperium with only the factions from the Discordant Stars expansion. And ever since I heard about this expansion, I've been very curious about what abilities and technologies the fans have come up with. So in this video, I will demonstrate the primary superpower for each of these 6 new factions, and at the end of the video I will share my opinion about the quality and the balancing of these factions, and ultimately whether or not I want to include these factions in my future games. And the first one we will look at is the Kollecc Society, which was the faction I played. And their primary ability is the Cloaked Fleets. It says here, after you produce 1 or more ships, you may place up to 2 of those ships on your faction sheet. Those ships are captured. We want to produce 2 dreadnoughts and 2 infantry, and those units will cost us 9 resources. And then with this ability we can place the dreadnoughts here, and we also got a mech in the system, so let's have a look at that. Nightshade Vanguard. At the end of a tactical action in this system, you may place up to 2 ground forces from this planet onto your faction sheet. Those units are captured, so we also produced 2 infantry, and now we are at the end of our tactical action, so we can also place 2 infantry on our faction sheet. And when it gets to be our next turn, we can for instance activate out here and move in with our destroyer. And now it looks like we will be severely undernumbered here. But if we take a look at the Shroud of Lith, after movement, if the active system contains 1 or more of your non-fighter ships, you may place up to 2 of your captured ships and 2 of your captured ground forces from your faction sheet in that system's space area. So now we can place the dreadnoughts and our infantry here, and the battle is now way more in our favor. And I think the combination of these faction abilities and the mech that makes the Kollecc Society a fun faction to play. And I think it is pretty powerful that we can activate our home system, produce units, but instead of placing them in the home system, we put them on the faction sheet, and that means that they are not locked down by the command token, and then we can move them out in the very same game round as we produced them. So let's have a look at the Tnelis Syndicate and some of their special abilities, and I want to highlight their faction specific destroyer called the Blockade Runner 1. And if we just take a look at it, it does not look that very special, because the only extra ability is that it gets to roll 1 extra die on anti-fighter barrage. So this looks like a downgraded version of the Strikewing Alpha from Argent Flight. But if we take a look at the upgraded one, then we also get Light Wave Deflector, because it says this ship can move through systems that contain other players' ships. And the anti-fighter barrage is increased even more, since we now get to roll 4 dice and hit on a 6 instead of the regular 3 dice. But what we still lack here is the capacity. But if we take a look at the mechs, then it says, after you move a destroyer into a non-home system other than Megator Rex, you may spend 3 resources to place 1 mech on a planet in that system. So let's take a look at how that can look. So we want to try and take Hope's End from the Kollecc Society here, and we activate the system and move in with 2 destroyers. And then we are now in the after movement step, so we get to place 1 mech down on the planet. That is at least how I read the card, and then we of course pay for it. In this example we use the 4 resources on our home system, and then we get to proceed to anti-fighter barrage. So first we roll 3 dice and we hit on a 9, and no hits there, and the second one produces 1 hit. So that is great. And then we proceed to space combat, hit a 9 here as well, so we get to produce 1 more hit, and now purple rolls and they also produce a hit. Yes, 1 more hit. And no hits. We won the space combat. And before we proceed to ground combat here, let's have a look at the agent. It says, at the start of invasion, you may exhaust this card to choose 1 ship in the active system. During this invasion, that ship may use its anti-fighter barrage as if it were bombardment. So we want to do that. And now we get to roll 3 dice, hits on 9, and we produce a single hit. So he sustains damage on his mech. And then we can proceed to ground combat just as normal. And yes, I think we can do some fun moves with our destroyers here, or the blockade runners as they're called. But I haven't tried to place this faction, so I don't know how much this will actually be used. But the faction also got another ability that says plausible deniability. When you draw 1 or more secret objective cards, draw 1 additional secret objective card. Then return 1 secret objective card to the secret objective deck. Shuffle that deck. So we basically get to choose between 2 secret objectives every time we get to draw 1 or 2 in this example here. And it also says, information brokers, you may have 1 additional unscored secret objective. So we will always have more objectives, or 1 more extra objective to be able to try and score during the game, and I think this gives some extra flexibility when it comes to scoring points. So in this way, I think the Tnelis Syndicate can be a fun faction to play, but I haven't tried them myself yet. And then we have the Vaylerian Scourge faction, and I will dive into the Scour faction ability as the first one. It says, once per tactical action, after you gain control of a planet, you may discard one action card to ready that planet. And this is of course very relevant in both the first and the second round of the game, where we gain control of the most planets. So we just need to get some action cards on our hand, and of course the political strategy card can help us with that. But we also got the agent that says, after a planet gains control of a planet, you may exhaust this card to allow that player to draw one action card. But of course we will always stand in the dilemma of discarding good action cards or unexhausting planets, and I think that can make some hard choices from time to time. And then let's have a look at our Cargo Raiders faction ability. It says, during the first round of a space combat, you may prevent your opponent from declaring a retreat unless they spend one trade good. And there is a synergy with this faction ability and their Raider 1, which is a faction-specific cruiser, because it says, during a round of space combat, if your opponent cannot declare retreat, hits produced by this ship must be assigned to non-fighter ships if able. This unit may only transport ground forces. And I think this can be a good counter towards Dreadnought factions or Warzone factions, because now we can shoot down the ships that are good at hitting, and then they will be left with their fighters only. But I do find this ability to be pretty situational. And the other good thing is that the cruiser also got capacity. It's just a shame that it is limited to ground forces. So it's not as strong as the Saturn engine from the Titans of Full. And then we got the Celdauri Trade Confederation. We'll skip the first faction ability for now and then look at Industrialists. During setup, place one additional space dock in your reinforcements. So let's start with looking at what they can do with these. It says, this unit's production value is equal to 2 more than the resource or influence value of this planet. And that is the first change here. So where we would normally place the space dock on Luke here because it got the higher resource value, now we want to place it on Aldane because the influence value is higher. And then it says up to 3 fighters in this system do not count against your ship's capacity. And that is the same as the normal one. Then we got production. And we can also see that the space docks got anti-fighter barrage that rolls 2 dice and hits on a 6. But getting 3 additional space docks out on the table would require too many game rounds if we could only do it with the construction strategy card. So we also got the agent that can help us. It says, at the end of a player's tactical action, you may exhaust this card to allow that player to spend 2 trade goods or 2 commodities to place 1 space dock from their reinforcements on a planet they control in the active system. So with the agent, we can actually place more space docks as we gain control of planets further out into the galaxy. And it's also related to the commander, because it says to unlock it, have 1 space dock on the game board that is not adjacent to your home system. And when we get him unlocked, then it says, after you activate a system that contains 1 or more of your space docks, gain 1 commodity. And of course this also helps with getting the commodities we need to pay for the space docks, or we can of course trade this commodity with another player. And then the second ability here is probably the most powerful one of the 2. Your ships may treat systems that contain 1 or more of your space docks as adjacent to each other. And this of course will help with some mobility within our slice. So let's say that we want to move our carrier to this system here and we don't want to go through the gravity rift, and we have gravity drive, then we can say 1, 2, because we treat these 2 systems as adjacent to each other. And then finally, if the blue player had some fighters in this system, then our first faction ability called Projection of Power would kick in, because it says at the start of any space combat in a system that is adjacent to or contains 1 or more of your space docks, choose up to 1 ship in that system to gain anti-fighter barrage 6 during that combat. So our carrier would be able to shoot a single shot against a fighter and produce a hit on a 6. I'm not sure how strong these faction abilities are, but Martin, who hosted the game, actually won with this faction, but I don't recall that it was either the anti-fighter barrage on the space docks or having the ability to treat these as adjacent to each other that actually made the difference. But I guess against fighter factions like Nalu or maybe the Vulrith Cabal, then having the extra anti-fighter barrage could help out. But in that case, I would probably also research Destroyer 2. And now we have the Veldyr Sovereignty faction. And these guys are all about researching technologies and unit upgrades. even though it is disguised by their business skills, because if we take a look at the first faction ability called Corporate Entity, during setup, take the additional Veldyr faction promissory notes. You have 4 faction promissory notes. Branch office attachments do not count toward scoring objectives. And what this text is referring to are these 4 planet attachments that the Veldyr player can hand out during each status phase. Then they can give one of these to one of the other players, and thereby increase either the resource or influence value of one of their planets. And that is explained here in targeted acquisition. At the start of the status phase, you may give one of your faction promissory notes in your hand to one of your neighbors. And this is the way to unlock our faction, and we are being rewarded by doing so, because we also got the holding company faction ability that says at the start of the status phase, for each planet that has a branch office attachment, you may gain 1 commodity or convert one of your commodities to a trade good. So this is a neat way to earn some trade goods in every status phase. And handing out these branch office attachments is also related to the commander, because we need to hand out these attachments to at least 2 other players before we unlock him. And when we do so, then it says, when you research the technology that is owned by a player who controls a planet with a branch office attachment, you may ignore 1 prerequisite on that technology. So we really want other players to research a lot of technology, so that we can skip some of the low tier technologies and go for the higher tiers alone. And it is also related to the hero that says, for each planet that has a branch office attachment, you may gain 1 unit upgrade technology of the same type as one owned by the player that controls that planet. Then purchase this card. And when the Veldyr player decided to play his hero, he actually gained 3 or 4 unit upgrades just by playing the hero. So he ended up with 5 unit upgrades, including the Warzone technology. And he also had the AI development algorithm, so he could produce Warzones with a 5 resource production discount. So he ended up being a pretty strong and dangerous player at the end of the game. And lastly, we have the Zelian Purifier, and this faction is all about bombardment. So if we start with taking a look at their infantry, it's called the Impactor 1. During an invasion, this unit must commit to a planet it bombards. And as we can see here, it got bombardment and hits on a 9, and then it has the regular combat on 8. And of course this can be upgraded to the tier 2 version, and then it bombards on an 8, and the general combat is also improved a little bit, and now it hits on a 7. So the chances of hitting on bombardment here is not that big, but it also got a faction technology called the Shard Volley that says, when 1 or more of your units produce 1 or more hits during a bombardment roll against a planet, produce 1 additional hit for that roll. So if we actually do hit, then we will at least produce 2 hits if we have this technology. And since most planets are not defended by more than 2 infantry, then this could actually be enough to clear the planet. But it doesn't stop here. Let's say we move in here with our carrier and 4 infantry. And then we take a look at the agent, and it says, at the start of invasion, you may exhaust this card to allow the active player to replace one of their infantry in the space area of the active system with 1 mech from their reinforcements. So we want to do that. So we put in a mech, take out an infantry here, and now you think, hey, but you cannot bombard on a planet that got a PDS on it. So if we take a look at the mech, it says here, at the start of invasion, if this unit is in the space area of the active system, you may remove this unit from the game board to destroy 1 unit on a planet in that system. So we can decide to remove the mech, and since the PDS is also a unit, we can remove that. And now the planet is completely open for bombardment. And when I played the game, I did have the Zelian Purifier as my neighbor, and he was lucky enough to get the secret objective about bombarding the last infantry on a planet. And he did exactly this because there were a PDS unit on that planet, and he removed it with one of his mechs. So that worked beautifully. And it could be fun to have the Zelian Purifier in the game, because they could potentially actually do something about Federation of Sol or Albeck, who are extremely good at holding planets with their infantry. Overall, I was impressed with the quality and the attention to details of these 6 factions. The print quality matches the original game components, and the graphics and the logos for each faction matches the style of the original game. So I doubt a new player would be able to tell them apart. And lastly, but most importantly, each new faction ability and technology is described in the same way as it is done in the original game. And that just makes it easy to pick up what the new factions can do. Even though it was a fun game and I enjoyed trying out these new factions, I'm not yet ready to include them in my future games. With the original factions, I still find new ways to use their abilities and technologies. So I really want to play a lot more games with these first. But I respect and I am impressed by all the work that the fans have put into this expansion pack. So good job with that. And with that said, thank you for watching. Please subscribe to my channel. It will mean a lot to me. And I'll see you in the next one.